Hi, I'm Stephen Nichols. I'm the founder of Banyan Business Outcomes. I'm focused on helping clients get the most value from their technology services relationships. I wanted to create a quick video today talking about best practices when hiring a project services or managed services vendor and a few questions that need to be asked, especially if you're looking for what I've called a true partnership. True partnerships are rare, and I've had the privilege of being a part of several of them throughout my career. True partnerships are based on co investment, trust, it's a willingness to challenge each other. But the benefit to both organizations can be unbounded and even exponential in nature because vendors become better because true partners force them to, and clients can achieve things that aren't possible without having that kind of tight bond with a vendor who's outside of the company. So I'm committed to finding these true partnerships and building them up, and I think it's a rather interesting part of technology services. So, how do you decide if a vendor has the potential to become a true partner, especially if you haven't worked with a vendor before? Well, I think there's three questions or three types of questions that you have to ask to see if that's going to be a possibility. The first one is, will I be a priority for the vendor? So, Pareto's law says that 80% of your outputs are going to come from 20% of your inputs. So, in other case, 20% of your investments probably result in 80% of your return. That's true for technology services firms as well. 20% of their clients, 20% of the business with those clients represents a majority of the revenue or contribution margin or value of the firm. So if you are one of the clients that fits in that 20% category and you have some kind of issue that needs to be resolved, well, it's pretty easy to get the CEO on the phone or the project leader, whoever it is. If you're not in that 20%, you're probably going to end up in the main queue with everybody else, and that might be okay for some types of vendors, but it's not probably okay for what you would call a true partnership. The balance of power is oriented more toward the client or toward the vendor rather, and that can become an issue. So there's a few questions to decide whether or not you're going to be a priority for the vendor down the road. And the first one is, what percentage of your clients are my size of company? Am I your biggest client? Am I your smallest client? Do you typically work in enterprise and I'm small, or vice versa? Getting a sense of where you fit in their client landscape is going to be rather important. Another area is, what percentage of your revenue will my business represent? So again, am I going to be 80%? That might be a problem, right? Especially if it's a smaller vendor with limited capabilities, because you can create undue risk if the vendor, for the vendor rather, if they have some kind of issue with your business. Or if you're 2% or 3%, well, that might not be great either, especially if you're looking for that higher level relationship. Another question to ask here is the deal profitable enough for you? So profit, especially for managed services companies, can be used as kind of a slush fund that just kind of take care of any kind of issue that might pop up. So for example, I need a specialist to come in and solve some kind of problem that my operational team created or that the client created and I wasn't anticipating. Well, we'll take it out of profitability. That'll be fine. If there's no profitability or if there's low profitability, then you can end up being nickel and dime for any of those kinds of incidental charges, and that can be quite challenging. Also, many managed services companies, probably all managed services companies, incentivize their project teams based on a contribution margin of their clients. So if you're a consultant, if you're a top consultant in one of these project services firms, are you going to want to work on a deal that isn't profitable, where you're not going to get the same kind of bonus? Yeah, probably not. You're probably going to be looking for a more profitable client. So those unprofitable deals that aren't that were created that way are going to attract maybe the more junior consultants or people who just get assigned to the project and consider this a low priority for them. The second area is the product going to be their priority? So technology services firms usually offer a wide variety of things. They have some products that are rising in importance and some products that are probably declining, especially if the company's been around for a long at all. Making sure that you're buying a service that is the priority for the company and not something being done off the side of somebody's desk is also going to be important in terms of the quality of service you get from the client from the vendor rather down the road. So I think BCG's product matrix is pretty relevant here. The BCG matrix compares market share, how much how much of the market does the vendor control, versus market growth. Is the market growing, or is it shrinking, or staying the same, or where is it at? So if there's a low market share low market growth kind of product, we call that a dog. And you're probably not going to see a whole lot of investment there because the return doesn't make sense for the vendor to make those investments. A question mark is where the market is growing very quickly, but the market share is very low. The company will need to make big investments in order to get into that dominant position and capture most of the value. But that's kind of a question mark for the vendor. The other area is where you have a dominant position in the market, but the market is no longer growing. So that's an area where you're probably not going to make any kind of investment, but you're just going to collect as much contribution margin as you possibly can. So think about like newspapers, right? Newspapers are shrinking, but a lot of companies have been buying those up because they know that there's good ad revenue to take until that market totally disappears. And then finally, there are stars where you have a majority market share and the market itself is growing quite a bit. So that's where you're going to put the bulk of your investments because the highest return for the vendor is going to be there. So if you're consuming a product from a vendor, where does that product fit on BCG's matrix? Understanding that is probably going to give you some insights into what it's going to be like working with the vendor down the road. So another question to ask in this area is what percentage of your clients or what percentage of your staff is dedicated to this product, right? And how do you anticipate those numbers to change down the road? If this is something done at the side of somebody's desk and that person has already moved into some other area of specialty, then it's probably not going to be a great vendor for you or a great experience when you're working with them. The third area is, can we be successful as a team? And there's really two different sides of that. The first one is, can my team, can the client's team support this new vendor coming on board? Do we have the bandwidth to do it? Is there a good personal connection between the two teams? Can they work together? Do they have similar values? Are they using the same kind of project management methodology? There's a lot of great questions in this area to see if there's great alignment between them. The other side of it is, what is it going to be like working with this client, right? Am I going to want to be a team member of theirs? So, most people try to look through references. You get 3 references and have a few 15-minute conversations with CIOs of companies that may or may not be relevant to your business. And that gives you a very shallow perspective on whether or not the vendor can perform. A better approach, of course, is a pilot where you're actually able to do a small piece of business and see how they actually work and how you actually get treated when you're really a client. But that's not always possible, especially for large, complex deals where it's not possible to pilot things out. So in any case, whatever you can do to get a sense of what it's actually like to work with a vendor is going to give you a good perspective on whether or not that vendor has the potential to become a true partner. So to review, the first question is, will I be a priority? The second question is, will the product I'm consuming be a priority for the vendor? And then finally, can we work together and be successful as a team and have that reciprocal, have that challenge-based, that the chemistry, the trust between the two organizations that leads to a true partnership, or at least leads to a successful outcome of the project or the service.